When I was a kid, I think most people had their own special spot to hang out, whether they liked being alone or with friends. For me, though, it was something pretty specific. It wasn't so much about a bunch of little details having to line up just right. It was more about the time of year when I could wander around in the tall corn stalks and hide from everything and everyone. Yeah, I'm talking about a cornfield. Now, this wasn't your typical, flat, wide-open field where the farmer plants the same crop every year. No, the thing that made this field different was that for some strange reason, the farmer only planted corn every other year. I never figured out why, but I think it might have something to do with the story I'm about to share. Back then, I had a small group of friends who lived close by. During the summer, we'd run through the woods, cross streams, hang out by the lake, and bike down the dirt road where I lived. But one day, we noticed the cornfield for the first time. I'm not sure how we missed it before, but looking back, I guess our young minds were so caught up in everything else that we just never saw it. But that day, when we finally did, we were all excited about the idea of running through the rows of corn that seemed to stretch up forever. We'd play games like hide and seek, tag, and even knock down parts of the corn and call them our forts. Sorry, Mr. Anderson. That whole summer, the field felt like this magical world where our imaginations could run wild. And no one ever told us we were doing anything wrong, or at least impolite. When the corn was harvested, we were all pretty bummed out. Two of my friends seemed especially down, like their whole world had just been taken away. I felt the same way. Honestly, there was this deep sadness inside me that came from not having that place to escape to anymore. That school year was one of the dullest I can remember. My friends and I started drifting apart, and even though we were just kids, there was this strange tension building between us, like something you'd expect from grown-ups who barely know each other anymore. Safe to say, we weren't too happy. Winter passed, and then spring came, followed by summer. I can't even tell you how excited I was thinking about going back to the cornfield. As summer got closer, my friends and I started hanging out again, all pumped up to dive back into our little world. But then my mom, Carol, told me she hadn't seen any corn growing in the field, and I couldn't believe it. I told my friends, but they didn't buy it. So, naturally, we decided to meet up at my place and ride our bikes out there to see for ourselves. To my, and I'm sure their disappointment, my mom was right. There wasn't a single stalk of corn to be seen. All we found was dirt with a few little plants poking up. Once again, we were crushed, and some of us started to wonder if we'd ever get to play in that cornfield again. Another boring year passed, and the more I thought about it, the more I lost interest in that cornfield. As summer rolled in and the first fields near my house began to show signs of life, I decided to ride down alone and check on the corn, just to calm my curious mind. As I rounded the row of trees that usually hid the field from view, there it was, in all its vibrant green glory. The cornfield had returned, or rather, Mr. Anderson had planted it again. My heart raced with excitement and joy. I thought about calling up my friends to tell them, but something else tugged at my mind. It was like some invisible force was calling me deep into the corn, urging me to go, and I couldn't ignore it. I ended up leaving my bike by the side of the road and heading into the field alone, without any real reason why. It was the middle of the day, and the sun hung high above, bathing the field in its warm, golden light. But once you're in the corn, it's easy to lose track of direction. One row looks just like the next. Sometimes it almost feels like the corn plays tricks on you. That's when I started noticing little ripples of movement between the stalks. At first, I thought my eyes were playing games with me. Every time I tried to focus on the movement, it would disappear. But then, I heard it, a quick, shuffling sound like something darting through the corn around me, moving fast and frantic. It reminded me of rats searching for food. Needless to say, I was pretty freaked out. Just then, my friend, Ethan, appeared out of nowhere and nearly scared the life out of me. "Ethan, what the heck are you doing out here?" I asked, my heart still racing and trying to catch my breath. He grinned and ran a hand through his messy brown hair. "The same thing you're doing, I bet," he said with a carefree laugh. Immediately, I felt a pang of guilt. "I'm sorry I didn't call and tell you or the others. I wasn't sure if the corn would even be here this year, and I didn't want to get anyone's hopes up." "Who cares about them?" Ethan said with a shrug. "We can have plenty of fun, just the two of us." There was something about his eyes that didn't sit right with me. They looked almost hungry, but being as young as I was, I didn't know how to make sense of it. Are you sure? Won't the others be upset if they find out we came out here without them? I asked, my voice soft. His eyes widened, and before I could blink, he grabbed my wrist. You can invite them tomorrow. Right now, it's just you and me, and I want to show you something. I hesitated but reluctantly agreed, even though there was something unsettling about how eager Ethan seemed. That night, I was yanked from sleep, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like a drum. It wasn't a nightmare, but something had shaken me awake. I quickly scanned my room, trying to figure out why I was suddenly wide awake in the middle of the night. At first, everything seemed normal, but then I caught a glimpse of the window. There outside was Ethan, his face pressed right up against the glass, staring in. I nearly jumped out of my skin, gasping in shock. Ethan didn't seem fazed at all. He just grinned at me, as if he thought it was the funniest thing in the world to scare me like that. I rolled out of bed, still trying to shake off the fear, and went over to the window. I didn't open it. I figured talking through the glass would be quieter. What are you doing here, Ethan? I asked, my voice thick with sleep, trying to sound more annoyed than freaked out. I just wanted to remind you to get everyone to the field tomorrow night, he said, practically bouncing with excitement, as if it were the most urgent thing ever. I'll call them in the morning. You should head home. I don't even get why you're out there in the first place. I replied, confused and starting to get frustrated. Ethan didn't say anything in response. He just nodded, still staring at me with those wide, intense eyes, before slowly backing away into the shadows beyond my nightlight's reach. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I know it wasn't normal behavior. The next morning I called John first. I told him what had happened with Ethan and how weird things had been getting. John wasn't happy, to say the least. He was upset that I hadn't called him about the field, but I explained everything honestly. I didn't know if the field was even there, and I definitely didn't know Ethan would be showing up like that. Eventually, John calmed down and agreed to meet up that night. Next, I called Lucas. He wasn't angry, but he seemed more confused than anything. Strangely enough, he agreed with me about Ethan's strange behavior. I didn't have to work hard to convince him. He was already in on it and didn't ask too many questions. Finally, I called Ethan to make sure we were all still on for the field that night. But when he picked up, he sounded completely flustered. I didn't go anywhere yesterday, he practically yelled. You're crazy, Daniel. For a moment, I almost doubted everything I'd seen, but after a few more confused comments from Ethan, he agreed to come out, even though he was the one who suggested it in the first place. My mom was suspicious and kept asking me what was going on all day. I got annoyed after a while and told her to stop asking. She must have sensed it because she didn't bring it up again. When night fell, I waited until I was sure my mom had gone to her room. Once I heard her door close, I grabbed the flashlight I'd hidden under my pillow and quietly slipped out of my window onto the cool grass outside. I hated the dark when I was a kid. My bike had been left outside, so often that the chain squeaked from rust as I pedaled down the dirt road toward the cornfield. On the way, I met up with Lucas, who had a flashlight clipped to his bike and another one in his hand. I rolled up next to him, and he nearly lost control of his bike. What the heck? Why'd you sneak up on me like that? He shouted, his eyes darting all over the place. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you, I said quietly, feeling bad about surprising him. This is so dumb, Lucas muttered after a moment, probably thinking about how ridiculous it was that we were sneaking out to check out the cornfield. I know, I said, and when I called Ethan, he acted like he had no idea what I was talking about. He did, Lucas asked, looking puzzled. That's weird, right? I mean, he's been acting off. Do you think he's messing with us? Maybe. Honestly, the bone thing is making me wonder if there's something wrong with him. Bone thing? You didn't tell me about that, Lucas said, sounding more surprised. Yeah, he led me to this spot in the field where a bone was sticking up from the ground. I don't know what kind of bone it was, but he asked me if I thought it was delicious. What? That's messed up, Daniel. How are you not flipping out over that? I don't know, it's Ethan. Maybe he's just into weird stuff, I said, trying to brush it off, though deep down, I wasn't as calm as I was pretending to be. Tell me about it, Lucas said, shaking his head. Then the conversation died, and we both focused on pedaling the rest of the way to the field. When we finally reached the edge of the cornfield, John was already there, sitting on his bike with a flashlight in hand. I was relieved to see everyone had brought one. I'd forgotten to mention it earlier. I scanned the area for Ethan, but didn't see him anywhere. Has Ethan shown up yet? I asked John. Nope, John replied flatly. You haven't seen him? No. Come on, John. Don't be like that. This wasn't Daniel's idea, Lucas said, nudging him. I'm tired, and I don't like mosquitoes, John said, swatting at his face. Neither do I muttered, glancing around. How long have you been here? John shrugged. I don't know, maybe 4 hours? 4 hours, I said, shocked. You've got to be kidding me. He chuckled. Nah, I've only been here for a bit. If anyone's messing with us, it's Ethan, Lucas said, kicking the dirt. Well, where is he then? John asked, turning his head away. Just then, we heard the unmistakable sound of bicycle spokes clicking in the distance. That must be him, I said, shining my flashlight toward the road. Ethan came skidding to a stop as he rounded the corner from the other side of the tree line, right in front of us. It's about time you showed up, said John, clearly irritated. I don't know what's going on, but I'm just here to see what all the fuss is about, said Ethan, looking confused. Why are you lying, Ethan? We were both out in the field yesterday. You even came to my window last night. I shot at him. I didn't do anything like that. I was in my bed just like you, yelled Ethan. Lucas got off his bike and walked into the middle of the road, standing between us. All right, enough of this, he said, his voice calm but firm. It doesn't matter right now. Let's just head in and figure out what's going on. If Daniel is messing with us, we'll find out. And if Ethan is doing the same, we'll figure that out too. Lucas had always been the level-headed one, even at 11. Fine, let's go, said John, his voice sharp. He hopped off his bike, gripping his flashlight like it was a weapon. This is so stupid, Ethan muttered, kicking his bike to the side and pulling out his own flashlight. Well, this will probably be over soon, said Lucas, his beam of light slicing through the darkness as he turned to face the cornfield. I'm not making this up, I whispered under my breath. I spoke quietly enough that no one heard me. A slight breeze picked up, carrying my words away into the night. I took out my flashlight and shone it where Lucas had pointed. The field looked the same, still ominous, still full of that strange pull that had been haunting me all evening. John and Lucas went ahead, with Ethan trailing behind them. I stayed back. If Ethan was planning something, I wasn't about to get caught off guard. We walked between the tall corn stalks for what felt like forever, but then suddenly, Ethan was gone. One moment he was right there, and the next he wasn't, like he'd melted into the air. I froze, shining my light everywhere, trying to find him. John and Lucas noticed I'd fallen behind and stopped too. Lucas shined his flashlight at me and called out, Hey, what's wrong? Ethan. He's gone. Gone? Asked John, his voice cracking slightly. Yeah, he was just here and now he's just gone. They both moved back toward me, searching with their lights. So, what do you mean, gone? Did he run off somewhere? Asked Lucas softly, sounding more curious than worried. No, he was standing right here and then just vanished. That doesn't make sense, said John, sounding more confused than anything. What doesn't make sense? Asked Ethan, suddenly appearing right behind me. I jumped out of my skin, my heart nearly stopping. What the hell, Ethan? Where did you go? I shouted, panic rising in my chest. Ethan grinned, that same unsettling smile from last night, and patted me on the shoulder. I didn't go anywhere. I've been right here. Daniel said you disappeared. John pointed out, his voice cautious. Yeah, well, sometimes this field plays tricks on your mind, Ethan shrugged, his voice full of casual dismissal. Muttered Lucas, not quite buying it. It wasn't just a trick, I said, my voice faltering. The doubt was starting to wear me down, but I wasn't going to back down. Something was wrong. Well, whatever, Ethan said, clearly uninterested. Let's just keep going. I guess, said John, sounding less than convinced. Lucas gave a silent nod in agreement. I didn't say anything. I just followed along, my nerves on edge. We walked deeper into the field. Ethan was acting weirder by the second. Every now and then, he'd turn around, stare at me with that creepy smile like I was the punchline of some joke I didn't get. He'd walk straight over the corn stalks like they weren't even there, like the rules of reality didn't apply to him. Then he stopped dead in his tracks. I have an idea, everyone, he announced, his voice a little too bright. An idea? Asked John. clearly not sure what to expect. "Let's play hide and seek," Ethan said, his voice almost unnervingly chipper. "Hide and seek? Out here?" Lucas asked, his confusion obvious. "I agree with John," I said, my voice shaky. "Maybe if it was daylight, but at night? I'm not playing that game." "Don't be silly. It'll be fun. I'll start as the seeker. You all have 10 minutes to find a spot and hide. You can even turn off your flashlights when you hide," Ethan said, his grin widening. "If it gets us out of here sooner, fine," John said, already turning to walk off. "Wait, John," I said, wanting to stick with him so I wouldn't be alone. "I'm hiding by myself. I don't want to be caught with the rest of you," Lucas said, moving in the opposite direction. "Oh, this is going to be so much fun," Ethan cheered. "I'll start counting now. 1, 2, 3. Ethan flopped down on the ground, burying his face in his hands and counting loudly. We could still hear him from a distance as John and I walked away, trying to find a good spot to hide. We eventually found a small area near a large rock, the corn surrounding it enough to cover us. After a while, John finally broke the silence. "I get it now," he said, his voice low. "Huh, Ethan is acting really strange. Did you see how his whole mood changed? After you said he disappeared. I mean, I told you something was off. And I'm not trying to be scared, but I'm freaked out." "Me too," John admitted, his tone more serious than usual. "At least we aren't like Lucas. Yeah, I don't think I want to be alone out here. Thanks for understanding, John." "No problem. Honestly, I was thinking of just walking back to the road and leaving." "Why don't we?" I asked, feeling a sense of urgency. He sighed. "You know I'm in Scouts, right?" "Yeah. What's that got to do with anything?" "Well, if you didn't notice, the direction I walked earlier was more or less the way we came from." "And?" I asked, a little confused. "And now where's the road?" he asked, turning to me. Even in the dark, I could see the fear on his face. "Maybe we haven't walked far enough?" I said, trying to sound reassuring. "No, Daniel," he said, sounding firm. "I've been counting the whole time. Even if we veered off course, we should have hit the road by now. And that's what's got me scared. Don't worry. Maybe you miscalculated," I said, trying to calm him down. "It's unlikely," he said, his voice sounding certain. Suddenly, there was a rustling nearby. It wasn't the wind. No breeze followed the noise. It was unmistakable. Someone was walking through the field, and they were getting closer. John clenched his fists, and I held my breath. Then, out of nowhere, Lucas appeared, sitting down next to us as if he hadn't just terrified us. "Lucas, what are you doing here?" I whispered urgently. He smiled, that same eerie grin, and said, "I got lonely where I was hiding, so I came to find you guys." "How did you find us out here?" John asked, sounding skeptical. "Oh, it wasn't hard," Lucas said easily. "You guys didn't hide far." "Not far," John replied angrily. "We walked for half the time Ethan should have been counting. I just don't see how you found us, but whatever. Just be happy we're all together now," Lucas said, his tone almost too cheerful. I suddenly felt a chill sitting next to him. He felt off. "Yeah, I guess," John muttered, not fully convinced. We sat in silence for a long time. I was tired, but the fear kept me wide awake. The buzzing of mosquitoes and Lucas's strange, excited breathing were the only sounds that kept me alert. After what seemed like hours, there was still no sound of Ethan calling. "Ready or not, here I come." I started to wonder if he'd just abandoned us out here for the whole night, playing some sick game. John nudged me, snapping me out of my thoughts. "What?" I whispered sharply. "I'm going to try finding the road again," John said, getting up. "Oh, are we trying to escape?" I asked, eager to leave. "We're not playing Ethan's dumb game," he said firmly. "Right?" I agreed, standing up with him. "I'll follow you," Lucas called out. He was acting more like Ethan now, and it sent another wave of unease through me. We started following John, but before I could catch up, Lucas passed me and went straight to John. They both moved through the corn at an odd angle, making it difficult to keep my flashlight on them. Then, just like Ethan, they both vanished. I froze in panic. Guys, where are you? Don't leave me out here alone. Please." My voice cracked as the fear surged through me. I did the only thing I could think of. I kept walking. The rustling of the corn around me, was all I could hear. Every new sound made my heart race faster, and the longer I walked, the worse it got. Sweat soaked my clothes, and I could feel my fears suffocating me. Out of nowhere, John appeared in front of me. He grinned at me, a look in his eyes that I'd never seen before, wide, wild, and full of something that made my blood run cold. "What's the matter?" he asked, his voice slow, almost deliberate. "Where did you go? And where's Lucas?" I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. "Don't worry about him. He went far away to hide." "No, you're lying. You both vanished just like Ethan," I shouted, my voice quivering in fear. "Come with me, Daniel. I'll get you out of here," John said as he quickly circled around me, heading in the opposite direction from where we had been going. "But that's the other way. I thought you knew the way out, John." "I must have messed up," John said, his voice brimming with excitement. "But the way out is this way." "Okay," I muttered, too exhausted to argue. John started skipping through the cornfield, and I did my best to follow, but I tripped over something and went crashing face first into the dirt. My cheek scraped hard against the ground, and my nose burned with pain. When I shined my flashlight on my hand, I saw it covered in blood, but it wasn't mine. The ground beneath me was soaked in it, sticky, dark, and thick, almost like oil. I let out a horrified scream, and John spun around, his face twisted with something I couldn't recognize. Before I could ask him what was going on, he crouched down and, without warning, began licking the blood off my hand. "What are you doing?" I yelled, yanking my hand away from him. "It's so good, isn't it?" He grinned, his teeth stained red. "You're scaring me, John. What is wrong with you?" He just gave a sick grin and then dashed off, leaving me paralyzed with fear. I sat there in the blood-soaked dirt, utterly terrified and unsure of what to do. Then, as if from nowhere, John's voice floated through the air, his words like a mocking whisper. "Come find me." I was lost, completely disoriented. Part of me wanted to run, but that had already proven impossible. So I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up my flashlight and started moving slowly through the field, praying I could make it until morning. In the back of my mind, I hoped my mom wouldn't find out I was gone, because I knew how worried she would be. My legs felt like they were made of jelly, and every step I took felt like I was fighting against the ground itself. As I stumbled through the rows of corn, I heard something horrible, wet chewing sounds like something was gnawing through flesh. At first, I didn't know what to think, but now I know it was exactly what it sounded like. When I pushed my way through a row of corn, I came face to face with something no kid should ever see. 3 bodies mutilated beyond recognition. Their intestines lay strewn across the ground, blood splattered across the corn stalks like some grotesque painting. Their faces, horrible, frozen in terror, were the only thing left that looked human. I could see through the dim beam of my flashlight that they were my friends. All of them, including Ethan. Each of them looked as if they had been killed in an instant, right before they could scream for help. My stomach twisted with dread, but there was something even more disturbing in the middle of the scene. A 4th body, still moving. I hesitated, then slowly shined my flashlight on it. It was John, well, not the John the first I'd been following. This John was sitting over Lucas's body, tearing at his leg, his teeth sinking into the flesh with an almost blissful expression. He didn't even seem to notice me, even though he had called out for me earlier. I nearly passed out from the sight. I've never been able to stomach the sight of blood in large quantities, and this was enough to send me spiraling. But somehow, I forced myself to stay on my feet. John, no, it was still feasting, and I stood there frozen, my body stiff with horror. I shouldn't even call it John anymore. This thing was tearing into my friends, devouring them, while I helplessly watched. It was grotesque, morbid, and completely insane. Then, I made the mistake of stepping backward. One loud, careless step that seemed to echo across the field. The creature stopped. It slowly turned its head, its neck twisting impossibly to face me, a grin spreading across its blood-soaked face. "You found me!" It purred, its voice dripping with malice. Its back shuddered, its body expanding in ways that shouldn't be possible, as if it were transforming into something else. Every instinct in me screamed to run, even though I knew there was nowhere to go. I turned and sprinted, my legs pumping as fast as they could carry me. Behind me, I could hear it, John's voice, but wrong. Come back, share the feast, taste the flesh, and become one with me. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I just kept running, refusing to look back. I heard it crashing through the cornfield behind me, but I pushed forward, determined not to be its next meal. The night felt endless, and no matter how hard I tried, my young mind couldn't make sense of what was happening. I don't know how, but eventually I found the road, and my bike was there too. Without a second thought, I hopped on and pedaled like my life depended on it, only glancing over my shoulder once to see John standing at the edge of the field, smiling, waving like we were old friends. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop until I was home, breathless, heart racing. I rushed inside, waking my mom, who was furious at first, but something in my eyes must have told her this wasn't a prank. She called the police, and I told them everything. They didn't believe me either, but they went out there anyway. About half an hour later, an officer showed up at our door. He wanted to talk to me. My mom stayed in the room while I told him everything, and he kept asking me if I was sure it wasn't an adult who did all this. Of course, I knew what I saw, so I stuck to my story. The officer left the room and spoke with my mom outside. I tried to eavesdrop, and I heard him say, "They found a clearing where 4 bodies were mutilated beyond recognition. 3 of them were kids, the other one's unidentifiable. I don't know what happened out there, but your son's lucky to be alive." That night, my mom stayed with me. She cried while I just sat there, numb, struggling to process everything. I couldn't stop thinking about my friends, about what had happened to them. It took me years to recover from the fear that haunted me in the dark. It took even longer to accept the truth. My friends were gone, and I was the only one left to remember them. The case eventually went cold, but one thing still haunts me to this day. It was revealed that the 4th body found was the farm's owner, Mr. Anderson. I drove past the field not long ago, completely by murder. No one owns the land anymore, not since the accident. The field's considered cursed, but it had somehow grown back. As I passed by, I saw Ethan standing at the edge of the field, waving at me like everything was fine. I hit the gas, not even looking back. I couldn't get away fast enough. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: always be careful around biennial cornfields.